There are moments in history where there are clear changes to life as we know it, like the invention of lights that technically made the day longer, or the continental expansion made way by railroads, allowing people to transport goods and ideas across countrysides much faster. With the help of a few good men and some not so good men, Gabrielle Bonner Chanel transformed women's fashion, not only by what they wore on the outside, but how they truly viewed themselves on the inside. She made revisions that would forever stick in the minds and the wardrobes of women all over the world, including myself. My name is Tara. I'm a retail strategist, a style enthusiast, and here are 3 ways Coco Chanel changed the lives of women through fashion. Gabrielle started and grew her business at a time when it was virtually impossible for a woman to be anything other than a nurse or a teacher if she had a career at all, because most women at that time were homemakers. She was born in France in August of 1883. Yep, she's a Leo. That would explain a lot. But she was born to low-income working-class parents. So Gabrielle was no stranger to hardships at a really early age. And things got even more difficult when her mom passed away when she was 12. Her father, not equipped to work and care for children, because that was just not something that men did at that time, sent Gabrielle and her sister to a convent where, amongst other things, she learned how to sew. The mode of dress for women in the early 1900s were full of corsets and lace and heavy fabrics and underpinnings and bulky padding. Coco Chanel removed what she deemed unnecessary details in fashion. In creating what evolved into what we now know as the Chanel suit, Coco took inspiration from a male suitor with whom she had an interesting relationship with. Let's take a step back. So after she left the convent at age 18, that's when she sort of created that persona and called herself Coco. She spent a lot of time during the day sewing to make money, but also she spent a lot of time singing at nightclubs in the evenings. During one of her performances in Moulins, France, she met a gentleman by the name of Etienne Balsan, who was a wealthy textile tycoon that supplied uniforms to the French army. Etienne had a thing for young performers, and it turned out that he was in the market for a new muse. He had recently ended a relationship with a high-profile actress who moved on to greener pastures. Etienne took in Gabrielle as his girlfriend, or kept woman, some would say at the time. As you can imagine, Etienne kept friends with similar social status as he did. Being that Coco had such a humble upbringing, she never quite felt like she fit in with his circle of friends. And this was largely due to the fact of the clothes that she wore were very inexpensive and they appeared that way. And you got to remember, this was around 1906, so there were very few department stores and there were definitely no malls. So most clothing at that time was handmade, and it was easier to tell the quality of clothing by the fabric or the stitching or even the colors used, because certain dye colors were more expensive than others. Coco decided to use her resources, and she took one of Balsan's expensive suits and reconstructed it to fit her. So she showed up to one of these parties in this suit, and it caused such a stir. Initially, the reaction was a little bit of confusion, and people were questioning her why she dressed that way. But she would just answer and say it's because it was more comfortable. But over time, she became somewhat of a centerpiece at these parties, and people were drawn to her because she, quite frankly, just dared to be different. Though the suit was not officially mass produced at this time, this event really is what gave birth to the Chanel suit. What makes the Chanel suit unique, especially at that time, was that it was made using fabrics that were more popular in menswear, like flannel jersey and linen, allowing women to look well-dressed and put together at any age. As I said earlier, remember, at that time, it was all about tight corsets and skinny waists and being snatched and pulled and a lot of uncomfortable garments. So Chanel really wanted to make clothes that honestly just made her feel comfortable. The First World War brought on lots of changes globally, as I'm sure we all know from reading our textbooks in history class. But at this time, while men were off fighting the war, women had to assume some of the roles and jobs that had been previously reserved for men. In many cases, this required women to wear pants. Now, on the flip side, when the men came home, naturally they wanted their women to go back to more traditional styles of dress. And here's where we insert the little black dress. Women at this point were used to not having to fuss with overly complicated garments, and quite frankly, they liked the comfort of the clothes that they wore while the men was at war. So they sort of welcomed the simpler silhouettes offered by Chanel. At this time, the color black was really reserved for people who worked in servitude or, those who were mourning. Coco wanted to make her dresses available to the widest market possible. And in 1926, that happened because Vogue featured a drawing of one of Chanel's drop waist design dresses on the cover of their October issue, comparing the dress to Ford's Model T, calling it the Chanel Ford. This comparison was appropriate not only because the simple dress design could be mass produced like the car, but like Ford said of the Model T, it's available in any color so long as it's black. Over the years, we've seen many iconic iterations of the little black dress, or what it was dubbed as LBD, from designers like Christian Dior, who shortly after Coco had a fuller skirt version, or the Givenchy one that we saw on Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's, again so iconic. And even Yves Saint Laurent in the 60s had a feather trim style that was very popular and is still very popular today. And many, many more. I feel like most ready-to-wear designers at this point has some version of a little black dress, but there's no denying that none of this would be possible if it wasn't for Coco Chanel daring to be different once again. Many design houses were known to carry a fragrance at their boutiques to complement the fashions, give you sort of a complete look and smell. But most scents at the time were very one note, drawing from one floral inspiration. Coco had the idea to commission a perfume that would be a combination of 80 different rare and expensive scents combined all into one. This scent really made it stand out from the other perfumes at the market and was a quick, huge success. Here's a fun fact. One of the most important flowers in the formula of the perfume is jasmine. And jasmine was first brought to Europe from North Africa when the Moors conquered Spain and parts of France. I bet you didn't know that. Anyway, back to Chanel. In 1924, Coco partnered with the Wertheimer brothers, who created a new corporate entity called Perfume Chanel. This was really so that the perfume could be distributed all over the world instead of just in the boutiques that were in France. Unfortunately, it was a really bad deal, and the deal left Coco with only 10% of the profits. And after realizing this harsh truth of the bottom line, Chanel worked for more than 20 years to gain control over the company. She was even quoted saying that Pierre Wertheimer was the bandit that screwed her. After many years of fighting, the two entities finally came to an agreement to renegotiate the 1924 contract, which gave her a lump sum of $400,000, which was her share of wartime profits, 2% of total global sales, not profits, global sales, and the rights to make any other perfume she wanted independently using her name. Her earnings were over $25 million a year, making her the richest woman in the world at the time. To this day, Chanel No. 5 is one of the most recognizable perfumes in the world, and still in 2021 is the #1 best-selling perfume. I personally got turned on to Chanel No. 5 by my grandmother, who wore it when I was a little girl, and I used to always play in her makeup and her scent and spray it on myself. So yes, I was the 9-year-old going to elementary school smelling like Chanel No. 5. That was me. Now, if we're going to talk about Chanel, we've got to talk about the dark side as well. You may have seen some salacious headlines that's leaving even myself with lots of questions as to her involvement with the Nazi Party. There was several rumors that she was a double agent or that she was even a Nazi outright herself. Although there's no records of her saying anything anti-Semitic, she was living in the Hotel Ritz that was the Nazi headquarters. But in her defense, she was already living there prior to the takeover of the hotel because it was located right across the street from her fashion house. And why not live in a Ritz if you can afford it? And another thing was she did try to appeal to the German government when they were seizing businesses with Jewish owners because the Wertheimer brothers, who you remember she had conflicts with, were Jewish, and she looked at it as an opportunity to get back control of Perfume Chanel. But the Wertheimer brothers were 2 steps ahead of her, and they had legally turned over the business to a Christian business partner who, after the war, turned it back over to the Wertheimer brothers. Even with all of that, the truth is that Coco had relationships with aristocrats truly on both sides of the conflict. So it could have just been coincidence that she dated a man who she later found out was a part of the opposition, or that she tried to use a political loophole to gain control over a business that she felt was rightfully hers in the first place. But considering the good, the bad, and the ugly, one thing is for sure, Coco had a way of turning traditionally unaccepted ideas into mainstream hits. It's just proof that she lived by one of her famous quotes: "In order to be irreplaceable, one must be different." My name is Tara. I'm a retail strategist and style enthusiast. Hope you enjoyed learning about the 3 ways Coco Chanel changed the lives of women through fashion. Thanks for watching.